Awesome stuff. More questions than answers. Thank you, JP, but we love it.
Yeah.
We love Star Wars.
All right. Talking about sinking our teeth into all health matters this morning. Let's talk about pain, inflammation and fatigue, which are some of the symptoms that are associated with arthritis, a disease previously thought to only affect aging adults.
Yeah, so this morning we are going to debunk that a little bit. We are going to be chatting to educational psychologist Dr. Sharon Aitken. Again, she's been on the show before. She joins us this morning to help break the stereotype by addressing the research she's done on what is called juvenile idiopathic arthritis. The research on this topic was the first research undertaken in South Africa, in fact, on the psychological and social effects of this terrible, often lifelong illness, and what it has on children and adolescents in particular. Sharon, welcome. Great to have you back.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's so cool that you have returned.
Congratulations. I was about to say, on the research, that the first ever research done on the psychological impact of GIA. And we look forward to learning so much. I know there's a whole community of people that are
families affected,
exactly, that are going to be watching this morning.
Welcome to you at home as well, yeah.
Inspiring a broader conversation. But let's first start talking about exactly what is GIA, or Juvenile Idiopathic Arthritis.
So GIA is basically an immune disorder, an autoimmune disorder. And I think it's really important to know that it's not the normal wear and tear arthritis that comes with old age. It's where the body actually attacks itself, and it causes great degree of pain in the joints and causes a lot of chronic fatigue. Children can get it from very early, from 2 years old, and as you know, it's lifelong in nature quite often, and unfortunately there's no known cure. So the kids are often on medication for long periods of time, and the medication is quite hectic, you know. They're on chemotherapy, biologics, yeah, so...
it certainly does show a natural then leap to want to research the psychological effects, especially on a child, of having to deal with something like this. How prevalent is it in South Africa and globally, I suppose?
Well, Professor Chris Scott and Dr. Kate Webb have conservatively estimated approximately 20,000 children in South Africa having this disease. But that's a conservative estimate, so it could be a lot more than that. I mean, some people have considered maybe even 60,000 children in South Africa with the disease.
Yeah.
So it's quite prevalent.
Let's try and gain a bit of an understanding of how this disease affects children from, I guess, an emotional point of view, a social point of view, psychological and academic.
The problem with the disease really is a lot of the children who have it have invisible symptoms. Some of them have visible symptoms, and then it affects them in slightly different ways. So if you have the visible symptoms and you're using crutches or you're in a wheelchair, obviously they receive a lot of pity and a lot of sympathy. They feel alienated and isolated quite often because people treat them very differently. One of my participants was saying that people almost treated her as if she wasn't very clever anymore just because she was in a wheelchair. When the symptoms are invisible, it's really sad because a lot of people think they're malingering because they cannot see the amount of pain and fatigue the kids are experiencing. So from an emotional perspective, both forms, visible or invisible, really does create a lot of isolation. And then, of course, nobody understands that children get arthritis, so they're often confronted with the phrase, but that's an old person's disease, you know. And so there's very little support either for the families or for the children themselves. And they also receive a lot of negative feedback socially. They receive very little help because there's very little awareness about it. Whereas if you have cancer or epilepsy or TB, everybody knows about it, so they rally around you. But when it's JIA, they go like, oh, but that's an old person's disease.
And
or
then, it's just a little bit of pain.
And then parents are told that they're overreacting. Children are told that they're faking it.
Oh, wow.
It's really quite hectic psychologically.
And it sounds like quite an extensive treatment plan then needs to be activated, and that in itself is a massive challenge.
Yes.
How then does it get identified initially if it's masked by so many other symptoms and often invisible, as you say? Where's the battle being fought?
Look, it's really hard to diagnose because it does mimic a whole lot of other illnesses that children can get. And as far as I know, I think we only have 5 pediatric rheumatologists in South Africa at the moment. And the research indicates that a lot of the doctors are not even trained in juvenile arthritis. It's not part of their degree. So it's very hard for them to recognize. They often end up with people who don't know what the disease is, and it can take up to 10 years or more to get a diagnosis.
Wow, and that's,
sure.
I would imagine when you start throwing the socio-economic background of particular patients into the mix, then it becomes a whole different
exactly. And that's why we're not sure how many children actually have it in South
suffering
Africa.
from it, sure.
All right, we're going to continue our conversation with Sharon very shortly, Dr. Sharon Aitken. And of course, the wonderful news that there is actually lots of support out there, because Arthritis
Community,
is a newly registered non-profit company that you can email and talk to. So you can email Catherine McCormick at admin@arthritis.kids.co.za, or you can give them a call on 021-762-1355. They also have a number 083-417-1271. And I understand, Sharon, that you also have started a support group and community in Cape Town for JIA sufferers and their families as well. And we'll have the details on the screen for you. But we will, of course, be continuing our conversation with Dr. Sharon Aitken very shortly.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back as we delve back into a very interesting and I think very important discussion this morning. So earlier on the show, we spoke about Juvenile Idiopathic Arthritis, JIA, and the impact it has on children and adolescents, and I suppose parents as well, entire families, with educational psychologist Dr. Sharon Aitken, one of the, I think, most dominant researchers in the area here in South Africa, but also someone who seems to be driving the sense of community and filling in the emotional context around this, because these are children, and that becomes a very emotional space to operate. I just keep putting myself in that situation of imagining my little one at age 2, age 3, having to deal with such chronic pain apart from anything else.
And perhaps we can shed some light on some of the difficulties and challenges faced by a parent in that situation, as you so adequately said earlier on, that it is a disease mostly associated with the aged.
Yes.
But now it is something that is impacting your child at such a, perhaps maybe you said as early as 2 years old, so it's such a crucial part of their life and development, where they're supposed to be enjoying life in its full spectrum.
Will it stunt their development at that age?
It certainly hampers them physically, so they might not be able to take part in lots of exercises and possibly become the person they would have become otherwise. The medication is also quite hectic, so it often prevents them from attending as many social events as they wanted to attend or would like to attend. I think it's not just the pain, it's the extreme chronic fatigue that can go with a flare. So it's quite an unpredictable disease. So they'll be fine and coping, and then something might happen, stress, or they catch a bug, and then the disease suddenly flares, and then they have high levels of fatigue where sometimes they can't even get out of bed. And the unpredictability of that is very difficult socially, both for the parents and for the children, because they can't always go to things or events that they were originally invited to and committed to.
Yeah. Now, with your research being focused on the psychological and social effects of JIA, let's talk about some of the challenges that might be faced by a parent.
I think one of the big things I would like to raise is the financial costs, because they're on... They are on chemotherapy, which, as far as I understand, the government pays for. But some of the children need biologics, and the government doesn't pay for that. The Red Cross Children's Hospital actually is able to do that for them, but of course they've got a limited scope of children that they can treat. The medical aides also don't know how to bill it, so often the claims are rejected. So that's a huge financial implication. Parents often have to curtail their work or give up their work in order to look after the kids, because some of them are really, really sick.
That's chronic.
And then of course the parents have to help support the children emotionally, because when you become so ill, you actually become quite depressed. So it really is quite a serious disease.
I suppose it really does reinforce the awareness element of what needs to be driven, because I keep wanting to ask, where do we need to be fighting this awareness battle? Do we approach government? Is it big business?
I just think we need to just make everybody aware of it, because not even the teachers. I mean, I just had a recent incident where one of the moms told me that the child was shouted at in class because they were too sick to work and too tired. So you know, and then disciplined simply because the teacher doesn't understand how sick the child actually is and that they're making a huge effort to be at school. So the ramifications are quite vast.
Yeah, so first things first, the national campaign, please, Minister of Basic Education, Ministers of Health, that we make aware all the concerned parties, teachers especially, children at school, go and have talks at school so that there's better understanding of this. I can imagine nothing worse than being punished in front of your classmates because of something that you have zero
no control of, or even worse, any idea of what's actually happening to you.
And that's where the Kids Arthritis Society is really good. They're actually going to school. So if a school is interested, they will do a school visit and do a talk about JIA and let everybody know, create the awareness, let them understand what it's all about.
On the 7th of November, you have a very important meeting. Tell me all about that, please.
Well, all I've done is I'm trying to set up a support group in Cape Town because a lot of the support is in Johannesburg at the moment. So I'm just inviting parents of kids who have JIA to come meet with me on the 7th of November. And we're just going to start hopefully creating a support network for parents in Cape Town so that we can suggest the doctors who are in the know, which doctors to go to so you're more likely to get a quicker diagnosis. And create support systems for parents of children who are newly diagnosed.
And perhaps maybe of parents that are curious and might not be certain, they haven't received a diagnosis yet, so they want to come and find out more.
Especially considering the diagnostic process is quite traumatic, and so they need the support during that process.
Oh, man, I think we could probably spend an entire hour-long show talking about this. Thank you so much for all of the efforts that you're doing on both sides from a research perspective, but also I think connecting to families out there. You are not alone. We're going to have all of the details for the various support structures that are in place on all of our social media platforms, but I think you can start with admin@arthritisiskids.co.za. If you want to ask those critical questions, I think just to educate yourself is probably the first step in the right direction. Doctor, thank you so much. Really, really interesting and quite sobering to delve into this.
Thank you guys for helping us create awareness. And can I also say thank you to my research participants for having been so brave and courageous and sharing their very sensitive stories with me.
Absolute pleasure.